Hello, everybody. It's 1 o'clock, so I think we'll go ahead and get started. Welcome to OER Iowa Action Team's first professional development webinar on open educational resources. My name is Mariah Burnett, and I'm the Scholarly Communications Librarian at the University of Iowa. And today I am joined by Kate Hess, who is the library coordinator at Kirkwood Community College. And she's going to be discussing today how she and her colleagues developed an OER support program on their campus. So we'll keep the microphones muted until the question period. But if you do have questions as they come up, just type them into the chat and I can kind of send those along to Kate. We'll aim for the presentation itself to last about half an hour, and then we'll take questions for the remainder of the time. So hopefully you all can hear okay. If there's any kind of technical problems or any other problems, just let me know through the chat, and then we can try to troubleshoot. So the whole session will also be recorded, so we'll have it posted on the Iowa OER Action Team's website probably sometime within the next week or so. So without further ado, I will turn it over to Kate.
All right, thanks, Mariah. And thanks to the Iowa OER group for inviting me here. Yeah, my name is Kate Hess, and I actually have been the library coordinator at Iowa City campus for many years. And just this summer, transferred to the Cedar Rapids campus, and my title is Digital Services Librarian now. So I'm going to kind of start out with a little background. I have headed our OER advisory committee for several years at Kirkwood. Just to give you a little bit of background on Kirkwood, for anyone who's less familiar, I just pulled a few statistics here. We're a large community college, 14,000 registered students this fall. Almost 2/3 of those students are part-time, and of course many of these part-time students are also working a full-time job. Looks like, okay, sorry, I will move my mic here. Is that better?
Yeah, that seems to be better, Kate.
Okay, great. Okay, so talking about Kirkwood, almost 2/3 are part-time. Many of these part-time students also working a full-time job, of course, or working and caring for children. That 7% as single parents is about 1,000 students. So it just kind of gives you an idea of what our students are working with, as you know, I'm sure many of you are already familiar with in your colleges as well. So we're talking about OER today, of course. And we're familiar with the high cost of textbooks, how students sometimes have to make decisions between, say, purchasing a textbook and being able to afford groceries or rent. These statistics on the slide are some general nationwide statistics, but we also have did a study at Kirkwood about, it was about barriers to student success, and we really found these patterns hold with our students as well. Many struggle financially during their time as students, and will go to great lengths to do what they can to not have to purchase a textbook, which of course does not turn out very well for them usually. And so that high cost means that just having access to a basic information resource that they need for their classes becomes a barrier to their learning. And so at Kirkwood, sort of our motivations for focusing on OER have been focused on that, just sort of those twin motivators of saving students money, and by doing that, ensuring equal access to information. There are, of course, lots of other benefits of using OER, but these kind of seem to be the ones that we keep coming back to at Kirkwood. So back in 2010 was when I first heard of OER, or open textbooks. My dean shared an article with me about open textbooks, and I just immediately ran with it, really. It made perfect sense to me that a community college should be supporting OER, and that librarians were natural partners in the work involved. Locating and evaluating resources, an understanding of licensing and copyright, also just being trusted and dedicated partners for faculty in their information needs. And of course, we librarians are notorious for jumping in and doing what needs to be done in whatever situation. And this was just an excuse to show pictures of the Packhorse Library project. Okay, so I'm going to move on now to just kind of the basic components of our OER support program here, kind of how it was built and what it involves. For us, probably the most important thing we did was to just talk widely with people across the whole college. Anyone who might have a stake in the adoption of a different type of textbook and the implications of what that change might be. I learned this in my own early OER training, that you really need buy-in from across the whole college, that it doesn't tend to work as sort of a top-down thing or as maybe a pet project from a single area. It might begin in either of those two ways, but it eventually needs to be college-wide. One of the best pieces of advice I got as a librarian specifically supporting OER, was not to have the library sort of own it or to have any one department own it, but again, to have that college-wide support. And what we tried to do was just connect OER to each area, sort of what they're already doing and their ultimate concerns.
It's really a revelation. It's hard for me too.
Folks, somebody's unmuted. Could everybody except for Kate please make sure their mic is muted?
Okay. So for us at Kirkwood, again, these are stakeholders that we identified. I'm just kind of go down the list. Academic affairs, administrators, so VP, assistant VP, deans. I mentioned an earlier study that was done here at Kirkwood, not related to OER, but just on barriers to student success that were based on individual interviews with students. That was one way that we connected with administrators, because the study found that the quickest way that we could begin addressing student financial stresses was to identify ways to make textbooks more affordable. So that was an easy way to, again, address the concerns of academic affairs specifically. And one thing that I did was I just started presenting about once a year to an academic affairs meeting to just kind of talk about OER, talk about, any new developments, and really just be there to address any concerns that anyone might have. Early on, I got lots of questions from deans and really found that those meetings helped put those concerns to rest, and also sort of made those deans great supporters of OER. Let's see, so faculty, of course. What we did with faculty, I honestly, I did a lot of, just running into people in the hallway and having individual conversations with faculty. But we also did a couple of different surveys of faculty, and just asking them, are you happy with your textbook? Do you have problems with students not purchasing their textbook? Would you like more freedom to have a different sort of alternative to the traditional textbook? Have you heard about OER? What concerns do you have? If you were to adopt OER, what kind of help do you think you would need? What kind of compensation would you want? So any of those kinds of questions we found really helpful. Librarians, again, as I said earlier, I really think librarians are natural partners in OER adoption. The main thing with librarians, I would say, definitely support librarians by letting them go get training, go to open education conferences, things like that. Maybe training in copyright, fair use, open licensing, whatever seems appropriate there. Instructional designers have been really important for us. They often talk with faculty about the resources they're using for their classes. And of course, they have the technological expertise in the learning resource management systems and loading files, restructuring their courses, all that kind of stuff. At Kirkwood, we have a Center for Learning and Teaching. They've been very involved in supporting OER and again, sort of raising awareness among the faculty that they talk to. Bookstores are an important one. Talking to our bookstore managers early on, were very concerned about OER and concerned that the college was promoting it to faculty, but having just kind of letting them air their concerns and addressing them really turned the bookstore staff into into allies with the OER program, and have been right there ready to adapt to the different kinds of services faculty and students might need related to more faculty moving away from the traditional textbook. I think students are important to look at as stakeholders. We didn't do a lot at Kirkwood to directly involve them in OER promotion, but again, just kind of being aware of their needs, their struggles with textbooks. We had some input from those earlier studies. We also had some early OER adopter faculty would survey their own students at the end of the course and ask them about their experiences with OER. So that's interesting to get that kind of feedback too. And the last one there with, making sure that the resources that faculty want to adopt are accessible to students with any kind of, visual impairment or whatever kind of special software students might be using to help them read a textbook. And yeah, their staff there at Kirkwood have been really helpful to sort of have them already be aware of what OER is before, we call on them for help. Okay, so kind of the second tier I called supporting your supporters. So after gathering information and really kind of addressing those early concerns, the next thing we looked at was providing support to OER adoption by, again, supporting, not just looking at supporting faculty directly, but providing training for other people. At Kirkwood, again, like my deans and the vice president were really supportive of any kind of training that I wanted to do, attending conferences, things like that. There are lots of different online trainings available. And then those key players can, of course, share what we've learned with our colleagues. I'm a big fan of webinars like this one. I've learned so much from just these quick, free, informal presentations on different resources, kind of what's new in OER, getting the chance to ask questions. I've just found them really helpful. One of my favorite is from this organization at the top, the Community College Consortium for Open Educational Resources. They have monthly free webinars, during, let's see, monthly during fall and spring semesters. But there's lots of good ones out there. And so related to the CCC OER, another thing that we did early on was Kirkwood joined CCC OER as an institutional member. For any community colleges out there, I highly recommend that. They're just a great group of people. It's a national consortium. I've done things like, brought in an expert to do faculty training through, I think it was Skype at that time. They have a great listserv that's very helpful. Just so many people willing to provide, one-on-one support, kind of work with you with your own, specific issues at your college and trying to support OER. Lots of good stuff there. So a little more about supporting your supporters, just kind of being aware of issues of time and duties for employees, that idea of asking somebody to add something to what they're already doing. This was something that I don't think I was very aware of when we first started, but in retrospect, I can see that it would be, something important to look at. Whether it means hiring extra staff to kind of fill in for somebody who is dedicating more time to OER, or just being understanding that, if you're asking someone to do more, that necessarily means they will have less time for other things. There are larger institutions that hire specifically an OER specialist, an OER librarian, things like that. At Kirkwood, we haven't done that. And I always, try to be aware of, I know it happens to librarians. It probably happens to other people too, but, that kind of impulse that some people have to, just have the library do it. Which always seems to ask more of us while not giving us more resources for that. But just something, to be thoughtful about. Again, as you go in and are asking people to add something else to what they're already doing. Okay, so moving on to supporting faculty adopters. This is probably, kind of the part that I talk the most about or think the most about, just that direct support of faculty. And I would say the best thing that we've done is just, again, talking to faculty, asking them what kind of support do you need? Sending out surveys or asking individuals. Sometimes visiting department meetings has been very helpful, because one thing I found is in doing workshops for faculty is that the sort of concerns of faculty with the materials they're using in courses, it seems to vary quite a lot from one discipline to the next. So beyond a very general workshop, maybe about open licensing or things like that, once you get beyond that, it gets hard to generalize. And so visiting departments who are interested in looking at OER, and again, asking them, what kind of support do you need? What would be helpful to you? And so I mentioned training, offering workshops. We offer classes through our Center for Learning and Teaching. I usually we'll do a presentation about OER of some kind or a workshop at our in-service days. Also just offering, sessions throughout the year. For me, all the things I've shown to faculty in workshops, the single thing that I need to explain over and over again and kind of keep repeating in different ways really gets back to the basic concept of what is OER, what are they, what is open licensing, how does it differ from copyright and fair use. It tends to be something like you say it and maybe people think that they know what you're talking about, but they don't. And so, again, kind of explaining in different ways, showing lots of different examples is something that I've learned to do. For example, and I think maybe this was more early on and maybe faculty are more aware of OER now, but I still do get that where people will say, oh, yeah, I've been using those for years. And I'll say, well, what resource do you use? And they'll say, oh, I use YouTube videos and I use, online articles and New York Times articles and things like that. And I'll say, okay, so those are free resources. And what I'm talking about is a little bit different and, kind of bring it back around to this concept of open licensing. And so, yeah, I think I end up talking about that more than anything else with faculty, is just kind of getting on the same page of what exactly we're talking about. Another thing that I found really helpful in talking with faculty is really bringing up sort of common benefits and common challenges of adoption. Faculty will definitely have their own concerns and, are not shy about sharing those. But kind of showing that, something like this, a study like this one is a national study that surveyed lots and lots of faculty, OER adopters, and just showing faculty that, yes, there are these, kind of commonalities so they can anticipate, these different benefits that they might not have guessed at, but also anticipate the kind of challenges that come up. And that definitely the time needed to change materials so drastically from the traditional textbook is definitely the top one, just across the board. But showing things like that, this has really helped to open up discussion and invite questions from faculty. And now beyond workshops and classes and things like that, having a way that faculty sort of know who to reach out to for one-on-one help is really important. Again, I have found that it's hard to anticipate exactly what help faculty are going to need. It seems to be different for every single person, kind of what they need help with. But definitely, I get the most questions about just locating materials. And so having a resource I can send them to where, here's a list of places where you can search for OER. Here's a summary of what the open licensing is. Here's information about how open licensing differs from copyright and fair use. Another common question is about how to attribute open materials. Again, I think part of it is just that shift to, thinking about things in terms of open licensing versus copyrighted. And, faculty are used to thinking about fair use, but the open licensing is it's a different way of thinking about it. And so, yeah, the question of how to attribute it it's just a common one that comes up. And I think I mentioned before, instructional designers have been really important in incorporating helping faculty incorporate resources into our LMS. Sometimes can involve converting files, again, reorganizing their course, setting up links to resources so that they make sense for students, things like that. And again, having them sort of on board and understanding what OER is and, willing to help, before you start asking them for help is a good way to approach it, I think. It worked for us anyway. And I mentioned, having a place to send faculty, and we started there. I looked around and there just wasn't a single good sort of guide to OER that was already ready that I could send faculty to. So I ended up just creating a guide on our LibGuide, which is expanded to several pages now. But yeah, just having that place to send faculty so they can see, oh yeah, there's more than just trying to Google for open resources, which is kind of an exercise in frustration. Giving them those links to repositories and search engines to use. Something that I've always wanted to do, and I feel like I have not been very successful at, is finding a way for faculty to sort of share with each other and a place to collaborate on switching to OER or developing OER. One thing I did was I started a blog, which it is active, and we do post things to there. It hasn't sort of generated discussion though, which was what I was hoping for. But it is nice. It's kind of turned into a place where I have faculty who adopt OER write about sort of their experience, and that's been good. I think one of the hurdles for faculty before they adopt OER is just sort of trying to picture, what would that look like if I adopted OER, and how are students going to access the resources? And so just seeing that, oh, yeah, my colleague, I know that person, they adopted an OER, I can go ask them. Or I can read this blog post and just see what their experience was like. So it didn't turn into sort of what I thought it would, but it's been helpful regardless. And one other thing that we've been able to do at Kirkwood is to offer a small stipend to faculty who convert a whole course to all OER. It's the equivalent of 1 credit hour teaching, equivalent of pay for 1 credit hour of teaching to faculty who convert a whole course to OER and share their materials with other faculty. If you look around a lot of different colleges, there's a lot of different ways to sort of have some kind of incentive or recognition for faculty who switch to OER. Some people do grants, some have things like an iPad or different kinds of ways to recognize all the time that they went through basically to do that. Here at Kirkwood, we've had 12 of our faculty who went through all the steps to converting their course and getting the stipend. It's hard to say how many faculty have already adopted OER. I know specifically of around 25, so I suspect that we probably have at least maybe 40, just because I'm sure there's a lot that I don't know about. So, as I said, I kind of started in 2010, and most of those adopters have actually been within the last year and a half. So it has really taken off for us pretty recently. So that's sort of the basics. Again, this is kind of what I what I came up with, sort of looking at this in retrospect, and is fairly different than what I imagined it would be like when we started, and kind of the things we planned for and the things we didn't plan for. So I don't know if anyone has questions or, want to share what you're doing at your college. We really can just open this up now.
Yeah, absolutely. If folks want to unmute their mics, you can always just weigh in with a question verbally, or the chat is open as well. So Angela says, are there search engines that are possible to look for OER materials similar to a specific textbook?
Yeah, there is. I'm going to see if I can switch my sharing here to well, sorry. Okay, I think I got this now. So there are lots of sites. Okay. There we go. Okay. That are specific to OER. There are a couple pretty recent ones. This one called Oasis and this one called Mason are two that are basically they aren't repositories for open resources. They just search a lot of other sources. So that's one route to take. Another one, like you said, finding specifically replacements for traditional textbooks. So faculty who say, I like my textbook, I just want students to not have to pay so much. So something like OpenStax, BC Campus, Lumen Learning, Open Textbook, those four there are basically focused on not anything and everything for an open licensed, educational resource, but specifically, that textbook format, it's just open licensed. And, I mentioned like frustration with Google. We kind of all tend to go to Google to search, to sort of start any kind of search, but it really is difficult to use Google to locate these specific types of resources.
Yeah, and I would just add to it, it can be very overwhelming, just the sheer number and volume of OER in some of these repositories. So I would second Kate's suggestion to start at a metafinder like the Mason OER metafinder. Okay, we also have a question from someone that says, how did you address concerns about students not having personal devices to access the material?
Yeah, that's kind of has been an ongoing question. At Kirkwood, we don't have a specific program, to support students who maybe don't have the funds to, to purchase a laptop or purchase, a tablet or something like that. What we've done is, talk to faculty about, sort of being aware of, if you're going to adopt an OER, being aware that whatever materials you adopt, being sure that students could, say, go to the library and print out all the materials that they need, you know, that there's an easily printable format, which usually, you know, it's just a matter of making sure you have the PDF file. Because they're open licensed, you know, you should be able to convert any file, you know, into a format that's easily readable and printable. There's some of our faculty who have adopted open textbooks. They actually work with the bookstore, and then the bookstore works with our print shop to just print, you know, loose leaf packets that have been 3-hole punched of the textbook. And now these are, the one I'm thinking of is black and white, but it's a full, you know, size textbook. And I think the bookstore charges $13 to students, basically just to cover the cost of printing. So yeah, I don't know if we have addressed it very well as far as making sure that students have devices to access these. I don't know if anybody else out there has a good answer for that.
Okay, do you make texts available for students through your learning management system, or are they responsible for finding the text themselves?
Yeah, they are posted to the learning management system. And like I said, in some cases there will be printed copies available at the bookstore that our print shop produces. And again, that kind of depends from teacher to teacher, if in their experience or in their subject, you know, they know that students are going to need to, say, annotate, or, you know, they're definitely going to want a print copy, or if it's something they really just need to access online and maybe pick the parts that they want to print or something like that.
Great. Anybody else have any questions? I had one for you, Kate. So you had mentioned a bit about the training that you provide to faculty, and that it's primarily library-led, from what I understand. But I was just wondering how those responsibilities are divided within your library, if it's just you who's giving these sort of workshops and sessions, or if it's divided in some way amongst other librarians, or if there's other sort of stakeholders at the college that are participating as well.
Sure. That's been really just sort of whoever, you know, gets interested in sharing something. It's been, like I said, you know, for me, I'm usually thinking about it, and so I tend to offer something pretty regularly. Probably more than half the time, there's either maybe another librarian with me. I've done it before with one of the instructional designers. I've done it before with one of the Center for Learning and Teaching people, you know, kind of depending on, you know, what exactly we're talking about.
Yeah, that makes sense.
Yeah, so
Do you find those are usually pretty well attended, or not so much?
I would say, so the ones I do during the semester, I usually only get just a few people. But that's typical for like anything that we would offer during the semester, you know, trying to find a time that people can come. But when we do it during, we call it collaborative learning days, but it's just that basic kind of, you know, in-service day. There's no classes, but faculty need to be on campus. And so when we have that sort of captive audience, I mean, they can choose what sessions they go to. But when I have those are usually a full house. I usually get, you know, a full classroom of 20, 25 people at those.
Good.
There's definitely, I mean, there's interest for sure.
Yeah, it always is hard to find a time when you're working with teaching faculty. That's actually been quite a barrier for us developing more of a collaborative sort of community of practice model for our faculty at University of Iowa, is just finding a time for everybody to meet.
Yeah, it's impossible. It really is.
I had one more question for you, Kate, about assessing the effectiveness of your program. So do you have any method for kind of tallying the number of courses that are using OER and calculating potential cost savings?
You know, I just this last year have been thinking that we really should do that, and I just haven't. But a lot of colleges do, and I think it's a really good way, you know, to get support across the college and, you know, maybe even outside the college to your community. And I think it gets, you know, parents' attention, it gets students' attention, seeing that, you know, the college is really, you know, working hard to try to save them money. So it seems like it's really worked well for colleges that have done it, but we have not.
Yeah, it's always a challenge. It's very tricky for us too here, but we sort of have the need for it, but not really the method yet. But I'd be curious if anybody on the webinar has had a successful sort of assessment of their OER use on campus. Actually, our action team is sort of looking at this issue right now as well, and hopefully by the end of the coming semester or so, we may have more of a kind of recommendations for best practices in that regard. We have another question. So do you have faculty creating OERs?
Not very many here. I've had a couple faculty that are really interested in it, and they are faculty who sort of were already creating a lot of their own materials because they weren't satisfied with, you know, what they were getting from the textbook. I more see faculty sort of finding, you know, maybe 3 or 4 textbooks that they like and taking pieces from each and putting them together into one, so that kind of remixing. I see that a lot more than actually authoring something original.
Yeah, that makes a lot of sense. So we have another question. Is there a particular department or discipline at Kirkwood that has adopted OERs and served as sort of a model for other faculty members?
Our distance learning department, they 2 years ago, they made it their department goal to see how many courses they could convert to OER. And yeah, there were quite a few who switched to OER, you know, with that idea that they could, you know, a student can enroll in courses online and then have the materials right there. Was kind of made sense for them. And then we also have a new, I don't know what they call it, program, I guess, at Kirkwood for competency-based education, where you kind of, it's that, how do you say it, where students enter the program and can kind of more go at their own pace. So if there's something they already know about, they don't have to spend so much time on it. And, you know, something that they do need to spend more time on it, they have the space to do that. And so the original program for that is in business and marketing. And so a lot of those courses now are using OER in business. Other early adopters, computer sciences, what else? You know, there were some interesting ones. Some of the adopters have been courses where the example that comes to mind is human services. And it was one of those courses where there was a textbook, but they weren't, it wasn't outstanding, and the information in it was basically out of date already by the time it was published, because there's so much about sort of you know, code and government regulations and things that change so frequently, federal and state level. And so they found that it just made more sense for them to really put together their own materials, and knowing that, okay, this file, I know I need to update it every year, and you know, I can use these maybe probably more public domain resources than specifically open licensed resources that they used. The ones that have the most trouble are English, literature, languages. Now, our math faculty have not, except for the ones who teach on distance, who teach online, they have found some good OER. The other math faculty, despite there being, you know, some really great math OER, they have not gone that way. They didn't want to make the switch. Not yet, anyway.
One thing that we find with math a lot of the time is that the sticking point is really the supplemental materials, which is kind of with OER generally, but with math in particular, it seems like they really are looking for problem sets, tests, homework questions. And we have found some open source or OER versions of those things online, but it is somewhat of a barrier, I think, for a lot of professors.
Have you looked at the Lumen Learning stuff, that OHM?
Yeah, we've looked at that a bit. Also, there's, I think it's called WebWork. That's from the American Mathematics Association, or I don't know, the acronym's AAM, I think. But they have a free and open homework platform, but you have to sort of locally host it or pay to have it hosted by them, which is, it's a nominal cost, but pretty curious to hear if others have had experience with that.
Yeah.
Okay, we have another question. Says, oh, okay, maybe this is more of an assessment question, but do you see that OER use is affecting retention?
Oh, we would love to show that. Yeah, that would be great numbers to be able to point to. I think at this point, it's too anecdotal because we don't have the numbers. You know, a large number of courses that have adopted, but we do have, yeah, I guess you'd say anecdotal evidence, right? Because, you know, individual faculty who have just recently switched from a traditional textbook to an open textbook, and looking just at their straight, oh, I usually have, you know, 10 people drop the class and this many people fail. And since I switched, you know, those numbers have changed. So yeah, I've definitely heard those anecdotal stories, but don't have the numbers, you know, to really make the claim, I guess.
Yeah, it's a hard thing to show, I'm sure. Do you know if Kirkwood has looked at all into Z-degree programs? The zero textbook cost for the entire program for any of its degrees?
Yeah, I think that's what the distance ed, when they made a move to try to switch to OER, that was kind of the idea, was that would be great if they could offer that. I don't know that they've gotten 100%, you know, all the courses that they would need switched to OER. But I think they're heading that way to see if they can do it. I think there's been you know, a hesitancy to mandate that faculty switch to OER. At least here there is. And faculty here also tend to really value being able to, you know, choose their own, of course, to choose their own course materials. We even don't get much where everyone who's teaching the same course agrees to the same materials, except here and there. So I think maybe that has been what has stopped that from happening so far.
Yeah, it kind of goes back to your earlier point about the importance of OER being sort of a bottom-up sort of movement, I guess, where faculty sort of have to take an interest themselves
Yes,
in order for it to take off.
for sure.
Does anybody else have any questions? Maybe I'll just give a few minutes to see if any trickle in, or again, you can always just unmute your mic and weigh in if you have any questions or comments. I'd be particularly interested to hear others on the call who are from community colleges to see if your experiences are similar to Kate's or very different. I'll also put a link to Iowa OER's website just so that you have the link so that you can go and view the archives if you want to, listen to this webinar, forward it on to those who missed it today. There's also some good reports, resources, things like that that are on that website that might be helpful to folks too. So, and there's a question kind of form on the page too. If you want to send it, it'll go to the members of our team. Okay, well, if nobody has any more questions, I think we can probably wrap up a little bit early. I want to give a big thanks to Kate for this presentation. I think it was incredibly informative to have kind of a template or a case study for us to kind of look at.
Yeah, you're welcome. Thanks for inviting me.
All right. Well, I hope everybody has a great weekend. I think we'll wrap up a little bit early since we don't seem to have any more questions. But yeah, if you have any questions, feel free to email Kate or myself. And everybody have a good weekend.
Thanks, Mariah.
Thanks.